Heavy rain poured down on the streets as Marcus and his daughter were driving home. Suddenly, they saw an elderly man, frail, soaked and trembling in a wheelchair at an abandoned bus stop. Marcus rushed out, phone in hand, ready to call for help. Before the call went through, the man stopped him with trembling fingers and whispered, "Please, don't send me back." Something in that plea made Marcus pause, and he brought the man home, giving him warmth, food and a safe place to sleep. What Marcus had no idea about was that the old man wasn't homeless, he was the father of a billionaire. And from that moment on, the billionaire's next move would change Marcus's life forever. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you watching from. We love to hear your thought. The rain hammered down on Houston's streets like bullets of ice, turning the evening rush hour into a crawl of red brake lights and frustrated drivers. Marcus Jenkins gripped the steering wheel of his aging Ford pickup, his knuckles tight as he navigated through the deluge. In the passenger seat, his daughter Sophia, just turned 16, pressed her face against the window, watching the storm transform their familiar city into something alien and threatening. "Dad, you think Miss Catherine will cancel rehearsal tomorrow?" Sophia asked, her voice carrying that particular mix of hope and disappointment that only teenagers can manage. Marcus glanced at his daughter, seeing the worry behind the casual question. They both knew that missing ballet rehearsal meant less stage time, and less stage time meant the scholarship scouts might look elsewhere. For a girl from their neighborhood, ballet wasn't just dance, it was a ticket to somewhere better. At 16, Sophia was already on the radar of several prestigious academies, her combination of grace, discipline and raw talent marking her as someone special. "Storm supposed to clear by morning," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his own exhaustion. He'd already worked a double shift at the warehouse, loading trucks until his back screamed and his hands went numb. Tomorrow he'd do it again. That was the deal he'd made with himself when Sophia's mother, Claire, had passed away from a sudden aneurysm 5 years ago. Work hard, be present, give his daughter a chance. The traffic light ahead turned red, and Marcus eased the truck to a stop. The wipers fought a losing battle against the rain, creating brief moments of clarity before the windshield flooded again. It was in one of those brief clearings that Marcus saw him. An elderly man sat hunched in a wheelchair at the bus stop, completely exposed to the storm. He wore a thin dress shirt that clung to his frail frame, his white hair plastered against his dark skin. No umbrella, no coat, no protection. Just sitting there as if he'd given up on the world entirely. "Dad," Sophia's voice was quiet but urgent. She'd seen him too. Marcus checked his mirrors. Behind him, cars were already honking, even though the light was still red. The bus shelter offered no real protection. Half its panels were missing, probably vandalized months ago and never repaired. This wasn't the kind of neighborhood where things got fixed quickly. His first instinct was to keep driving. Marcus had learned to be careful, to protect what little he had. The city could be cruel, and stopping for strangers could lead to complications he couldn't afford. He had Sophia to think about, bills stacking up at home, and a job that wouldn't wait if he got caught up in someone else's trouble. On his warehouse salary of $38,000 a year, there was no margin for error, no cushion for complications. But then the man raised his head slightly, and even through the rain-streaked glass, Marcus could see the defeat in his posture. He reminded him painfully of his own father in his final days before the dementia had taken him completely, that same look of being lost in a world that had forgotten him. The light turned green, the car behind them honked again, longer this time. "What do we do, Dad?" Sophia asked, and Marcus heard something in his daughter's voice that made the decision for him. It was the tone of someone testing what kind of man her father was, measuring him against some internal standard. Marcus pulled the truck to the side of the road, ignoring the angry horn blasts from the cars behind them. "Stay here," he told Sophia, but his daughter was already unbuckling her seatbelt. "No way, Dad, he looks like he needs both of us." They stepped out into the storm together. The rain immediately soaked through Marcus's work shirt, cold and shocking. He jogged toward the bus stop, Sophia right beside him, their sneakers splashing through puddles that reflected the amber glow of streetlights. Up close, the elderly man looked even more fragile. His wheelchair was old, one of those basic models with thin wheels that would be nearly impossible to push in this weather. His hands trembled as they gripped the armrests, and his eyes, clouded with cataracts, barely seemed to register their approach. "Sir," Marcus knelt down to be at his eye level, rainwater streaming down his face. "Sir, are you waiting for someone?" The man's head turned slowly toward his voice. When he spoke, his words were slurred, difficult to understand. "Bus. Miss the bus. The buses stopped running an hour ago because of the storm," Marcus said gently. "Do you have someone we can call, someone who can come get you?" The man's expression crumpled, confusion and fear warring in his weathered features. He tried to speak again, but the words came out garbled, nonsensical. Marcus recognized the signs immediately. He'd seen them in his own father. Stroke, probably. Maybe dementia. This man wasn't just lost, he was alone in ways that went beyond geography. "Dad, we have to help him," Sophia said, and there was no question in her voice, only certainty. Marcus looked at his daughter, this young woman who'd already lost so much, who had every reason to be bitter and closed off, yet somehow remained open-hearted, and felt his last reservations dissolve. "Sir, we're going to take you somewhere safe, okay?" Marcus said. "Somewhere dry and warm. Is that all right with you?" The man's clouded eyes focused on him with sudden intensity, and he nodded slowly. A single tear mixed with the rain on his cheek. "Sophia, help me get him to the truck." They worked together, Marcus lifting the frail man while Sophia grabbed the wheelchair. He weighed almost nothing, his body bird-light in Marcus's arms. As they carried him to the truck, Marcus felt him trembling, whether from cold fear or something else, he couldn't tell. Getting him into the passenger seat took careful maneuvering. The wheelchair folded awkwardly into the truck bed, and Sophia squeezed into the small jump seat behind them. Once they were all inside, the sudden absence of rain felt almost shocking. Marcus cranked the heat up as high as it would go and turned to look at the man. In the truck's dome light, he could see him more clearly. Despite his bedraggled state, there was something dignified about his features, a bearing that suggested he'd once carried himself with pride. His shirt, though soaked, was of good quality, or had been years ago. Around his neck hung a simple gold locket, the only jewelry he wore. "Sir, can you tell me your name?" Marcus asked gently. The man's mouth worked, struggling to form words. Walter, Walter. Sophia supplied from the back seat. The man nodded, relief flooding his face at being understood. "Okay, Walter, I'm Marcus, and this is my daughter Sophia. We're going to figure this out." He pulled out his phone, preparing to call 911. The hospital would know what to do, how to help him. But as he started to dial, Walter's hand shot out with surprising speed, gripping his wrist. His strength shocked him. He shook his head violently, panic clear in his eyes. No hose, hospi. "Sir, you need help, medical help." Walter's grip tightened. "Home," he managed. "Please, home." Marcus exchanged a glance with Sophia in the rearview mirror. This was getting complicated. If he took him to the hospital against his will, he might cause a scene. If he didn't, and something happened to him, he could be held responsible. And yet, looking at the raw fear in Walter's eyes, he understood. Hospitals could be frightening places for the elderly, especially those with dementia. "Do you know where you live?" Marcus asked. "Can you tell me your address?" Walter's face crumpled again, confusion washing over him. He looked down at his hands as if they might hold the answer, then back up at Marcus with such helplessness that his heart ached. "It's okay," Marcus said softly. "We'll figure it out. Sophia, check his pockets carefully, see if there's a wallet or ID." Sophia leaned forward gently, and Walter didn't resist as she checked the small bag attached to his wheelchair. Inside was only a handkerchief, and a few coins, nothing useful. "Dad, what do we do?" Marcus sat back, thinking hard. The rain continued its assault on the truck's roof, a relentless drumming that seemed to echo his racing thoughts. He could drive him to the police station, let them handle it. That was probably the smart move, the safe move. But he remembered his own father, remembered how frightened he'd been of uniforms and official buildings in his final months. "We take him home with us," Marcus said finally. "Just for tonight. Tomorrow in the daylight, we'll figure out who he is and where he belongs." "Are you sure, Dad?" Sophia asked, though there was approval in her voice. "No," Marcus admitted, "but it's what we're going to do anyway." He pulled back out into the storm, heading toward their small house in the 3rd Ward. Walter sat quietly beside him, his trembling gradually subsiding as the heat filled the cab. After a few minutes, his head drooped forward, exhaustion claiming him. "He's asleep," Sophia whispered from the back. Marcus nodded, keeping his eyes on the road. He had no way of knowing that this simple act of kindness, stopping for a stranger in the rain, was about to change everything. Sometimes destiny doesn't announce itself with trumpets and fanfare. Sometimes it arrives soaked and shivering at a bus stop, waiting to see if anyone will stop. Marcus Jenkins had stopped. The Jenkins home sat on a quiet street, where the houses leaned into each other like old friends sharing secrets. It was small, just 3 bedrooms, and 1 bathroom, but Marcus kept it immaculate. The lawn stayed trimmed, the fence painted, the porch swept clean. Getting Walter inside proved easier than expected. He woke as they pulled into the driveway, confused but compliant. With Sophia's help, Marcus got him into the house, and settled on the living room couch. "I'll get towels," Sophia said, already moving toward the bathroom. Marcus knelt beside Walter, studying him in the better light. He was probably in his mid-70s, though hardship could age a person beyond their years. His hands were gnarled with arthritis, his skin paper thin, and marked with age spots. But there was something in his bearing, even in his confusion, that spoke of resilience. "Walter, can you understand me?" Marcus asked. He nodded slowly, his eyes more focused now that they were out of the storm. "We're going to get you dried off and warm. Then I'll make you something to eat. Is that okay?" Another nod. He was watching him carefully, as if trying to determine whether to trust him. But underneath the wariness, Marcus saw something else, a deep, bone-weary relief at being somewhere safe. Sophia returned with towels and helped drape them over Walter's shoulders. The old man accepted their ministrations with a kind of quiet dignity. "Dad, should we try to get him into dry clothes?" Sophia asked. Marcus hesitated. That felt like crossing a line too intimate for strangers. "Let's just get him warm first. I'll make some tea, maybe some soup." In the kitchen, Marcus went through the motions automatically, but his mind was racing. What had he gotten them into? Taking in a stranger was one thing, but an elderly man who clearly needed medical attention. What if something happened to him during the night? He pulled out his phone and searched for recent missing persons reports in Houston. Nothing matched Walter's description. He tried the police non-emergency line, but after being put on hold for 15 minutes he gave up. Tomorrow. He'd deal with it properly tomorrow. "Dad." Sophia appeared in the kitchen doorway. "He's saying something, but I can't understand him." Marcus carried a mug of hot tea back to the living room. Walter was more animated now, trying to speak, his hands gesturing weakly. The sounds coming from his mouth were distorted, but there was urgency behind them. "Take your time," Marcus said gently, setting the tea on the coffee table. "We're listening." Walter's eyes filled with frustrated tears. He pointed at the locket around his neck, then at Marcus, then toward the window. The meaning wasn't entirely clear, but Marcus sensed he was trying to tell them something important about his life. "Is it about your family?" Marcus asked. "Someone we should call?" Walter nodded vigorously, then grabbed the locket with shaking fingers. After 3 attempts he managed to open it. Inside were 2 small photographs, faded with age. The first showed a young man in military uniform, proud and strong. The second showed a baby. "Your son?" Marcus asked, pointing to the man. Walter nodded, a soft smile breaking through his distress. But then his face crumpled again, and he made a sound that could have been a name, though Marcus couldn't make it out. Marcus carefully took the locket and examined the photos more closely. The military uniform looked to be from the 80s, maybe early 90s. The young man had Walter's same bone structure, his eyes. This was definitely family. "We'll find him," Marcus promised, though he had no idea how. "I'll take pictures of these photos. Tomorrow I'll start making calls, posting online. Someone will know who you are." The relief in Walter's face was immediate. He sank back into the couch, some of the tension leaving his body. While Marcus made sandwiches, Sophia sat with Walter, showing him photos on her phone of her ballet performances, telling him stories about school. Marcus listened from the kitchen, amazed at his daughter's easy compassion. They ate together in the living room, the TV playing quietly in the background. Walter managed most of his sandwich, though he needed help holding it. After eating, his eyes grew heavy again. "Let's get you to bed," Marcus said. "You can sleep in my room. I'll take the couch." But as he helped Walter down the hallway, a thought struck him. What if he fell during the night? He couldn't hear him from the living room, not if something went wrong. On second thought, he said, "I'll set up a cot in here, just to make sure you're okay." Walter's hand squeezed his arm, a gesture of gratitude that needed no words. Marcus found his old camping cot in the garage and set it up beside the bed. He helped Walter change into one of his old t-shirts, turning away to give him privacy. Once he was settled under the covers, his breathing already deepening toward sleep, Marcus lay down on the cot. The rain had stopped. Through the window he could see stars emerging from the breaking clouds. His body ached with exhaustion, but his mind wouldn't settle. Who was this man? Where was his family? How had he ended up alone at that bus stop? The locket suggested he had a son, maybe a military veteran. But why wasn't he looking for him? From the bed, Walter made a small sound, not distress, just the soft sigh of someone finally feeling safe. Marcus listened to his breathing synchronize with sleep and felt his own eyes growing heavy. Tomorrow would bring answers. Tonight they'd given shelter to someone who needed it. That was enough. Marcus woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of voices. For a disoriented moment, he thought Claire was still alive. Then reality settled back into place and he sat up on the cot, his back protesting every movement. The bed was empty. Walter was gone. Fear shot through him like electricity. He scrambled to his feet and rushed toward the kitchen, already imagining disaster. Instead, he found a scene that stopped him in the doorway. Walter sat at the kitchen table, now dressed in one of Marcus's oversized button-down shirts and a pair of sweatpants. His wheelchair was positioned beside him, and Sophia stood at the stove, apparently teaching him how to flip pancakes. He was smiling, genuinely smiling. And when Sophia successfully flipped one without dropping it, he clapped his hands together like a delighted child. "Dad." Sophia turned, spatula in hand. "You're up." Walter wanted to help make breakfast. Marcus leaned against the doorframe, overwhelmed by the simple domesticity of the scene. "How long have you two been up?" "About an hour. I heard him moving around and came to check on him. He can't really talk, but we've been communicating okay. He knows what he wants, you know. You just have to pay attention." Marcus watched his 16-year-old daughter, mature beyond her years, patient and gentle, and felt a swell of pride mixed with sadness. Sophia had been forced to grow up too fast after Claire died. They ate breakfast together, and Marcus couldn't remember the last time their kitchen had felt so full. Having Walter there, watching him enjoy Sophia's pancakes with such obvious pleasure, changed the entire atmosphere. After breakfast, Marcus called in sick to work, something he almost never did. His supervisor wasn't happy, but Marcus had enough accumulated sick days that he couldn't be denied. His paycheck would take a hit, but finding Walter's family was more important. He started by taking clear photographs of the locket and the pictures inside. The military photo was his best lead. Then he tried the police again, this time getting through to someone who promised to check missing persons reports. No matches for anyone named Walter who fit his description. He called local hospitals, asking if anyone had reported a missing elderly patient. Nothing. The officer he spoke with suggested posting on social media. These days, that's often faster than official channels. Take a photo, share it around. Someone might recognize him. Marcus was reluctant. Something about posting Walter's picture online felt like a violation of his dignity. But what choice did they have? Sophia took a photo of Walter from a slight angle, showing enough of his face to be recognizable but preserving some privacy. Marcus wrote a careful post, "Found this elderly man at bus stop during last night's storm. He appears to have suffered stroke or has dementia and cannot communicate his address. Goes by the name Walter. If you recognize him or know his family, please contact me. He needs to get home to people who love him." He deliberately didn't include the locket photo yet. Something made him want to hold that detail back, perhaps as a way to verify anyone who came forward was truly family. He shared it to his Facebook page and to several Houston community groups. Then he sat back and waited. The The responses came quickly, but none were helpful. People shared the post, offered sympathy, suggested calling various agencies he'd already contacted, but nobody recognized Walter. By afternoon, Marcus's post had been shared over 500 times. By evening, over 2,000. The next day brought a call from a local news station. They'd seen his post and wanted to do a story about the Good Samaritan warehouse worker who'd taken in a stranger. Marcus declined at first, uncomfortable with the attention. But then he reconsidered. If Walter's family was out there, media coverage might reach them faster than social media alone. He agreed to one interview. They came to the house that afternoon, and Marcus kept it simple. We found him alone in the storm. Anyone would have done the same. We just want to help him get home. The story aired that evening during the 6 o'clock news. Marcus's phone started ringing immediately, not with information about Walter, but with offers of help, donations, strangers moved by the story. I don't want money, Marcus told each caller. I just want to find this man's family. But still nobody came forward to identify Walter. 3 days passed, then 5, then a week. Walter settled into their home with surprising ease. He seemed content, even happy. Sophia came home from ballet each day, eager to spend time with him. They developed their own communication system, gestures, expressions, simple sounds that Walter could manage. Marcus would come home from work to find them watching game shows together, Walter making excited noises when contestants won, clearly following along despite his inability to speak. But the bills were mounting. Marcus had to return to work after that first day, which meant leaving Walter alone for hours. Mrs. Patterson, their neighbor, offered to check on him during the day. She refused payment at first, but Marcus insisted on giving her $15 per visit, $300 a month he couldn't really afford, but felt was necessary. Then came the doctor's visit. Marcus finally convinced Walter to see someone at the free clinic. The diagnosis was what he'd suspected: vascular dementia, likely caused by multiple small strokes, combined with the lingering effects of a more significant stroke that had damaged his speech center. The doctor prescribed medications for blood pressure, cholesterol, and a blood thinner to prevent future strokes. The prescriptions cost $240 per month, even with the clinic's sliding scale discount. By the end of the second week, Marcus was juggling bills, deciding which ones could wait and which couldn't. The electric company sent a warning notice. He was behind on rent. He'd stopped eating lunch at work to save money, telling himself he wasn't that hungry anyway. Sophia noticed. Of course she noticed. "Dad, we need to talk," Sophia said one night after Walter had gone to bed. She looked uncomfortable, conflicted. Marcus braced himself. "What is it, sweetheart? I know we're in trouble financially, I can see it." Sophia paused, choosing her words carefully. "And I know Walter needs help, but Dad, I'm scared. What if we can't find his family? What if we go broke trying to take care of him? What about my academy applications?" Marcus felt his chest tighten. This was the conversation he'd been dreading. "I know, Sophia, I'm scared too. So what do we do? I don't know yet. But I know that if we give up on him now, if we just hand him over to some state facility because it's easier, I don't think I could live with myself." Marcus reached across and squeezed his daughter's shoulder. "And I don't think you could either." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded slowly. "You're right, but Dad, we need a plan. We can't just hope things work out. I know, starting tomorrow, I'll apply for assistance programs, see if there's any help available. And maybe I can pick up some weekend shifts, make extra money. I could get a job," Sophia offered. "The coffee shop near the studio is hiring. I could work weekends and maybe 2 evenings a week, the nights I don't have rehearsal." "Sophia, you're training." "I train 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. I can handle 2 evening shifts and weekends. Lots of girls at the studio work part-time." Sophia's voice was firm. "Dad, Mom always said family takes care of family, and right now Walter's family, even if he's not blood. We can't just think about my future, we have to think about his too." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. This was the girl Claire had raised, generous, compassionate, willing to sacrifice for others. "Okay, But you keep up your grades and your training comes first. If either one slips, the job goes. Deal? Deal. The next week, Sophia started working at the neighborhood coffee shop, making lattes and clearing tables on Saturday and Sunday mornings and Tuesday and Thursday evenings after rehearsal. Marcus picked up Saturday shifts at the warehouse. Together they scraped by, barely keeping their heads above water. But something else was happening. Marcus updated his social media post during the third week, adding clearer photos of the distinctive gold locket and the military photograph inside. He wrote, "UPED date, Walter wears this gold locket, with photo of young man in military uniform, appears to be 1980s to 90s era. This may be his son. If you recognize this person or this locket, please contact me immediately." The updated post went viral. Within 24 hours, it had been shared over 15,000 times. Regional news picked it up. Then national news. "Have you seen this man?" became a rallying cry across Texas and beyond. People were moved by the image of Walter, by the story of Marcus and Sophia taking him in, by the mystery of the military photo. Social media users started their own investigations, trying to identify the uniform insignia, the time period, anything that might lead to Walter's identity. But still, silence from anyone who actually knew him. Then during the third week, came a knock on the door that Marcus had been both expecting and dreading. He opened it to find a middle-aged woman with a clipboard and an ID badge. "Texas Adult Protective Services, Mr. Jenkins. I'm Angela Morrison from APS. I need to speak with you about the elderly gentleman you're housing." Marcus's stomach dropped, but he let her in. The woman spent 2 tense hours grilling him about his decision to take in an elderly stranger, walking through the house, inspecting everything. She spoke with Walter, who clearly adored Marcus and Sophia. She checked Sophia's room, her grades, asked her probing questions about whether she felt safe, whether her father was doing anything inappropriate. Finally, after 2 hours, Angela closed her notepad. "You're good people," she said. "That's clear. But Mr. Jenkins, you need to understand the reality of this situation. You're not licensed as a foster parent for adults. You're not related to this man. You have no legal authority to make medical decisions for him. And from what I can see, the financial burden is already affecting your family significantly. We're managing," Marcus said. "Are you?" Angela's voice wasn't unkind, but it was firm. "Your daughter is 16 and working 2 jobs. You're behind on rent. You've sold personal belongings to pay for his medications. This isn't sustainable, Mr. Jenkins. It's admirable, but it's not sustainable." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying that if we can't locate his family or establish legal guardianship within a reasonable time frame, he'll need to be placed in state care. For his protection and yours." Angela paused. "I'm going to give you 6 weeks from today. That gives you time to continue your search, to explore options. But at the end of 6 weeks, if there's no resolution, I'll have to initiate placement proceedings." 6 weeks, Marcus repeated, feeling the weight of that deadline. "I know it seems harsh, but Mr. Jenkins, what happens if he has a medical emergency and you're not legally authorized to make decisions? What happens if he wanders off and gets hurt? What happens if you go bankrupt and can't care for your own daughter?" Angela's voice softened. "You're doing an incredible thing. But there are systems in place for situations like this, imperfect as they are." After Angela left, Marcus sat at the kitchen table, head in his hands. 7 weeks total, the 3 that had already passed plus the 6 she'd given him. If they didn't find Walter's family by then, he'd be taken away, placed in some underfunded state facility where he'd be just another body to feed and medicate. The thought made him sick. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus threw himself into the search with renewed desperation. He contacted veterans organizations, showing them the military photo. He posted in elderly care forums. He reached out to every Whitmore listed in Texas public records. There were hundreds of them, and none recognized Walter. He started selling things. His father's old power tools, carefully maintained for 15 years, went on Craigslist for $300. The dining room table they rarely used brought in $150. His gaming console from before Claire died, still in the box, never opened, sold for $200. Each sale felt like losing a piece of their life, but Walter needed care more than they needed belongings. One night during the 4th week, Marcus sat at the kitchen table again, bills spread out before him, calculator in hand. No matter how he juggled the numbers, they didn't work. Even with Sophia's coffee shop paychecks and his Saturday shifts, even selling everything they could spare, they were going under. The rent was now a full month behind. The electric bill had a final notice, his truck payment was late. Walter appeared in the doorway in his wheelchair, having somehow maneuvered himself from the bedroom. He looked at Marcus, at the bills, at his haggard face, and his expression crumbled. He understood, maybe better than Marcus had thought he could. He knew he was a burden. He raised a trembling hand, and pointed to himself, then to the door. The meaning was painfully clear. Send me away. I'm not worth this. No, Marcus said firmly, absolutely not. Walter's eyes filled with tears. He pointed again more insistently, trying to form words that wouldn't come. His mouth worked, and finally, with tremendous effort, he managed to. Much, sorry. I said no. Marcus stood and moved to him, kneeling so they were eye level. You're not going anywhere. You're not a burden. You're a person who needs help, and we're going to keep helping you until we find where you belong. Walter reached out and touched his face with his gnarled hand. A single tear rolled down his cheek. In his eyes, Marcus saw gratitude, love, and a deep sadness, as if he knew this couldn't last, as if he'd learned long ago not to trust in kindness. We're going to figure this out, Marcus promised, taking his hand. Somehow, but as he helped Walter back to bed, Marcus wondered if he was being kind or foolish. Was he keeping Walter for his sake, or because sending him away would mean admitting defeat? That night, sleep wouldn't come. Marcus lay on the cot, listening to Walter's breathing, and thought about impossible choices, about the price of compassion, about how the system was designed to make it nearly impossible to help people without sacrificing yourself in the process. He pulled out his phone and looked at the calendar. 5 weeks since they'd found Walter, 6 weeks until Angela's deadline, 11 weeks total before Walter would be taken away. Marcus closed his eyes and prayed harder than he'd prayed in years. If you're listening, he said quietly, help me do right by this man. Help me find his people. And if there's a reason he came into our lives, help me understand it. The only answer was Walter's soft snoring and the distant sound of sirens on the night air. But sometimes prayers are answered in unexpected ways. Sometimes they're answered by someone who's been running from the truth, finally deciding to face it. Sometimes they're answered by a billionaire's guilt finally becoming unbearable. The call came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 5 weeks after they'd found Walter. Marcus was at work, struggling to focus on loading pallets when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Is this Marcus Jenkins? A woman's voice, professional and brisk. Yes, who's this? My name is Patricia Hartwell. I'm an attorney representing the Whitmore family. I believe you're currently caring for Walter Whitmore. Marcus's heart leapt. Finally. Yes, I am. Are you from his family? I represent his son Benjamin Whitmore. We need to meet, today, if possible. Of course. When and where? They arranged to meet at a coffee shop near the Galleria. Marcus told his supervisor he had a family emergency, technically true, and left work. On the drive home to check on Walter and change clothes, his mind raced. The Whitmore family. Walter's last name was Whitmore. His son must have finally seen the posts, must have been searching for him. But something nagged at him. 5 weeks. The posts had gone viral 3 weeks ago. If his family had been searching frantically, why had it taken this long? At home, he found Sophia and Walter in the living room, going through a photo album together. Walter looked up as he entered, his face brightening in that way that still made Marcus's heart ache. I got a call, Marcus announced. A lawyer. Someone from your family, Walter. They want to meet today. Walter's reaction wasn't what he expected. Instead of joy or relief, fear flashed across his face. He shook his head violently, making distressed sounds, his hands gripping the armrests of his wheelchair until his knuckles went white. "Walter, it's okay," Marcus said, kneeling beside him. "You're going home. Isn't that what you wanted?" But Walter kept shaking his head, reaching out to grip Marcus's hand with surprising strength. His eyes pleaded with him to understand something he couldn't articulate. He pointed at his chest, then at Marcus and Sophia, then made a gesture that clearly meant, "Stay here." "Maybe he's just nervous," Sophia suggested, though she looked troubled. "It's been a while. Change is scary, especially with his condition." Marcus wanted to believe that, but Walter's terror seemed disproportionate to simple nervousness. Still, what choice did they have? If this lawyer represented his family, they had legal rights that superseded his care. "I'll meet with the lawyer," Marcus said gently, "just to talk. Nothing's decided yet, okay, Walter?" Walter didn't look reassured. He held onto Marcus's hand, and Marcus had to gently extract himself to leave for the meeting. Bella's Cafe was the kind of place Marcus never went to, polished and expensive, where a cup of coffee cost what he usually spent on lunch for 3 days. He felt immediately out of place in his work clothes, surrounded by people in business suits conducting hushed conversations over tablets and laptops. Patricia Hartwell was easy to spot. She sat alone at a corner table, mid-50s, impeccably dressed, with the kind of confidence that came from years of winning. She stood as Marcus approached, extending a manicured hand. "Mr. Jenkins, thank you for coming on such short notice." Marcus shook her hand, noting her firm grip, the expensive watch, the designer briefcase. Everything about her screamed money and power, more money than Marcus would see in 10 lifetimes. "Of course, I'm just glad someone finally came forward. Walter's been with us for 5 weeks now." "Yes, about that." Patricia gestured for him to sit. "Let me explain the situation. Walter Whitmore is the father of my client, Benjamin Whitmore. Perhaps you've heard of him." Marcus shook his head. Patricia raised an eyebrow, as if this was inconceivable. "He's the founder and CEO of Whitmore Technologies, one of the largest tech companies in Texas, worth approximately $8 billion. The number was so large it didn't feel real. Marcus stared at her, trying to process it. "Walter's son is a billionaire." "Yes, and he's been searching for his father since he went missing from his care facility, approximately 10 weeks ago." 10 weeks? Marcus's voice rose. "He's been missing for 10 weeks and nobody reported it officially. I've had him for 5 weeks. The posts have been shared over 30,000 times. Why are you only contacting me now?" Patricia's expression cooled slightly. "Mr. Whitmore hired private investigators. He doesn't trust public institutions to handle family matters. They've been conducting their own search. For 10 weeks they searched, and somehow missed the posts that went viral 3 weeks ago." Marcus leaned forward. "That doesn't make sense. Unless what, Mr. Jenkins? Unless they found him weeks ago and were waiting for the right moment to make contact." Marcus's voice hardened. "Or unless they weren't really looking that hard in the first place." Patricia's jaw tightened. "I assure you Mr. Whitmore's team was conducting a thorough investigation. The challenge was that your initial posts didn't include identifying details. When you added the photograph of the locket 3 weeks ago, that's when we were able to make a definitive connection. However, we needed time to verify the identification through multiple sources, prepare the necessary legal documentation, and develop an appropriate care transition plan. These things take time when done properly. 2 weeks to verify and prepare," Marcus said skeptically, "or 2 weeks to figure out how to handle the PR nightmare of a billionaire who lost his father." Patricia's expression hardened. "Mr. Jenkins, I understand you're emotionally invested in Mr. Whitmore's well-being, but I assure you, tell me about this care facility." Marcus interrupted. "Where is it? How did he go missing?" "Pinecrest Manor. It's a very exclusive facility in West Houston. There was an incident during a supervised outing. Several residents with dementia managed to slip away from staff during a momentary lapse in supervision. By the time they realized Mr. Whitmore was missing, he'd disappeared. We believe he was on his own for approximately 5 weeks before you found him. The storm that night complicated matters significantly. 5 weeks on his own,"
Marcus said quietly, trying to imagine what Walter had endured. Did they report him missing to the police? They reported it to Mr. Whitmore's security team immediately. As I said, he prefers to handle sensitive family matters privately, but not to the police, not officially. Marcus felt anger building. An elderly man with dementia goes missing for 5 weeks, and nobody filed an official police report. Mr. Whitmore wanted to avoid the media attention that's exactly what happened anyway. Marcus interrupted. Except it happened because strangers on the internet cared more about finding him than his own family apparently did. Patricia's expression turned icy. Mr. Jenkins, I didn't come here to be accused of it. Mr. Whitmore is a very busy man with enormous responsibilities. He delegated the search to professionals. He delegated finding his own father. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. How often does he visit him at this Pinecrest place? Patricia hesitated just a fraction too long. That's not relevant to how often. Mr. Whitmore ensures his father receives the finest care available. His personal visitation schedule is not your concern, which meant rarely, if ever. Marcus could read between the lines. Can I ask you something, Miss Hartwell? In the 10 weeks Walter's been missing, how many times has Benjamin Whitmore been on the news pleading for his return? How many press conferences? How many personal appeals? Mr. Whitmore values his privacy and his father's dignity. He didn't want to turn this into a media circus. It became one anyway. The difference is I was trying to find his family because I cared about him. What was his excuse? Patricia closed her briefcase with a sharp click. Mr. Jenkins, I appreciate your concern, and Mr. Whitmore appreciates the care you've provided. But legally, you have no say in Mr. Whitmore's care. His son has full power of attorney, medical and financial. He'll be returning to Pinecrest today. Today, Marcus felt panic rising. This is just a preliminary meeting. I haven't agreed to anything. You don't need to agree. Mr. Whitmore has legal authority. He's waiting outside and would like to see his father immediately. I want to meet him first, Marcus said. I want to talk to him before Walter goes anywhere. Patricia studied him for a moment, then nodded. Fine, come with me. Outside, a black Mercedes sedan sat idling at the curb, so polished it reflected the afternoon sun like a mirror. As they approached, the back door opened, and a man stepped out. Benjamin Whitmore was in his early 50s, tall and lean, with Walter's same bone structure, but none of his warmth. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus's truck, and his expression was one of controlled impatience, a man used to people accommodating his schedule. His eyes flicked over Marcus dismissively, the look of someone evaluating whether this interruption was worth his time. Mr. Jenkins, he said, extending his hand without warmth. Thank you for caring for my father. I'm sure this has been quite an inconvenience. Marcus ignored the hand. Your father was alone at a bus stop in a thunderstorm. In a wheelchair, at night. How does that happen?
Benjamin's expression flickered, annoyance, maybe a flash of guilt, quickly suppressed. There was a security failure at the care facility. Several residents managed to leave during an outing. By the time staff realized my father was missing, the storm had begun. It was unfortunate. Unfortunate. Marcus let the words sit between them. He could have died out there. He was out there for 5 weeks apparently, surviving God knows how, vulnerable and alone. But he didn't die. Thanks to you. Benjamin's tone made it clear he was ready to move past this conversation. I'm prepared to compensate you generously for your time and expenses. Shall we say $100,000? I think that's more than fair. The number hit Marcus like a physical blow. $100,000. For a moment he couldn't breathe. His mind raced through what that money would mean. The rent caught up with enough left over for 6 months paid in advance. Sophia's ballet academy tuition covered for years. The truck repairs he'd been putting off. New shoes for Sophia instead of the worn ones she kept dancing in. Medical insurance. A cushion finally, against disaster. No more juggling bills, no more choosing between electricity and groceries, no more humiliation of asking Mrs. Patterson to wait for payment. Every cell in his body screamed to take it. Every practical bone, Every exhausted muscle, every part of him that was tired of struggling, it all reached for that offer like a drowning man reaches for air. He could feel his hand starting to extend, starting to shake Benjamin's hand, starting to say yes. Then he thought about Walter's face that morning. The fear when Marcus had told him his family was coming. The way he'd gripped Marcus's hand and tried to say, "Stay here, I don't want money." Marcus heard himself say, even as part of his brain screamed that he was insane. Even as he felt something inside him break, knowing he was turning down their salvation. "I didn't take Walter in for money." Benjamin blinked, clearly not expecting this response. People in his world didn't turn down 6 figures. "I see. Well, surely you've incurred expenses, medical costs, food, care supplies, time away from work. I simply want to make things right, to compensate you fairly. Things would be right if Walter had been found sooner. Things would be right if he'd never been lost in the first place." Marcus felt his anger solidifying into something harder, clearer, anger that helped him push away the temptation, that made him certain of his choice. "Can I ask you something? When's the last time you saw your father? Actually spent time with him, not just a 5-minute obligation visit?" Benjamin's face hardened. "My relationship with my father is none of your business. It became my business when I found him abandoned in the rain. It became my business when I spent 5 weeks caring for him, sitting with him, making sure he knew he wasn't alone in the world." Marcus stepped closer. "So I'll ask again, when's the last time you visited your father?" "I visit when my schedule permits." "That's not an answer." Benjamin's eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone, Mr. Jenkins. You seem to have forgotten who you're speaking to." "Oh, I know exactly who I'm speaking to. A man worth $8 billion who couldn't be bothered to visit his own father. A man who hired private investigators, but somehow they failed to find what 30,000 strangers on Facebook found in weeks. A man who's more concerned about media attention and privacy than about whether his father is safe. You have no idea what you're talking about." Benjamin's voice dropped to something dangerous. "You don't know anything about my life, my responsibilities, or my relationship with my father. I know he was terrified when I told him you were coming. Does that tell you anything?" For just a moment, something flickered across Benjamin's face, pain, or maybe recognition of an uncomfortable truth. But it vanished quickly, replaced by cold anger. "My father has advanced dementia. He's confused, frightened of many things. His fear doesn't indicate anything except that he's ill and needs professional care." Benjamin straightened to his full height, using it as intimidation. "Now I've been patient with you, more patient than most would be. But my patience has limits. You will return my father to me today, or I will have you arrested for kidnapping, elder abuse, and custodial interference. And trust me, I have enough lawyers to make your life a living hell." "Mr. Whitmore," Patricia put a warning hand on her client's arm. "No." Benjamin shook her off, his composure cracking. "This man needs to understand his place. He's nobody, a warehouse worker who happened to find my father and thinks that gives him some kind of moral authority. It doesn't. He doesn't get to judge me. He doesn't get to lecture me about responsibility when he has no idea what it's like to run a company, to have thousands of employees depending on you, to make decisions that affect entire industries." "You're right," Marcus said quietly. "I am nobody, just a guy with a warehouse job and a teenager to raise and more bills than money. But you know what? That makes it even sadder. Because if nobody like me can find the time to care for your father, to sit with him and make him laugh and help him feel human, what's your excuse?" "He will have the best care money can buy," Benjamin said through clenched teeth. "But will he have love? Will he have someone to hold his hand when he's scared? Will he have someone who sees him as a person instead of a problem?" Marcus paused. "Your father isn't a PR issue to manage or a responsibility to delegate. He's a human being who deserves to spend his final years feeling loved and valued, not warehoused in some expensive facility where you can write a check and forget about him." For a long moment, Benjamin just stared at him. Something worked in his jaw, some internal struggle. When he spoke again, his voice was barely controlled. "Get my father, now, or I make that phone call to the police, and you'll be arrested in front of your daughter. Is that what you want? To traumatize the girl by having her father dragged away in handcuffs?" Marcus felt his fists clench. Everything in him wanted to fight, to refuse, to protect Walter from this cold man who saw him as an inconvenience. But Sophia's face flashed through his mind. The life they'd built, how a legal battle would destroy everything. He couldn't win this. He'd never been able to win against people like Benjamin Whitmore. Money and power always won. Fine, Marcus said, the word tasting like ash. But I want to be there when you take him. I want to explain it to him myself. I owe him that much. Benjamin nodded curtly. Acceptable. We'll follow you. The drive home felt endless. Marcus kept glancing in the rearview mirror at the expensive Mercedes following him, feeling like he was leading executioners to an innocent victim. His hands trembled on the steering wheel and he had to grip it tighter to stop the shaking. How had he gotten here? 5 weeks ago he'd made a simple choice to help someone in need. Now he was drowning financially, emotionally exhausted, and about to hand Walter over to a man who demonstrated nothing but neglect and indifference. At the house, Sophia met him at the door, still in her ballet practice clothes, her hair pulled back in the tight bun she wore for training. "Dad, what's happening? There's a fancy car outside, and Dad, are you okay?" Marcus put a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "It's Walter's son. He's come to take him back." Sophia's face fell. "But Dad, he doesn't want to go. You saw how scared he was." "I know, sweetheart, but we don't have a choice. He has legal authority. If we refuse, I could be arrested. We can't fight this. That's not fair." "No, it's not." Inside, Walter sat in his wheelchair by the window where he'd been watching for Marcus's return. The moment he saw Benjamin enter behind him, his entire body went rigid. He made a sound of pure distress, a keening wail that came from somewhere deep and primal, shrinking back in his chair, his hands coming up as if to ward off a blow. "Hello, Father," Benjamin said, his voice softening slightly in what might have been an attempt at gentleness. "It's time to come home." Walter shook his head frantically, violently, reaching for Marcus with desperate hands. His mouth worked, struggling to form words through his panic. "Mr. Whitmore, everything will be fine," Patricia said in that condescending voice people use with children and the mentally impaired. "We're taking you back to Pinecrest, where the doctors and nurses can take care of you properly." Walter's distress escalated. He grabbed Marcus's hand with both of his, holding on with desperate strength, tears streaming down his face. His mouth worked harder, and finally, miraculously, he managed 2 words that came out clear and unmistakable. "Please, stay." Marcus knelt beside him, his own heart breaking. "Walter, I'm so sorry. I tried, but I don't have the legal right to keep you here. Your son, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." Benjamin interrupted, his voice tight. Marcus could see the discomfort in Benjamin's face now, the way he wouldn't quite meet his father's eyes. "Patricia, call the medical transport team. They can assist with the transfer." "Medical transport?" Marcus stood abruptly. "You mean you want to forcibly remove him? My father is clearly in extreme distress. The transport team is trained to handle agitated patients. They'll ensure he's moved safely and comfortably. They can provide sedation if necessary for the drive." "Sedation?" Marcus's voice rose. "He's not agitated, he's terrified. He's terrified of you. Can't you see that? Maybe if you actually listened to him, instead of treating him like a problem to solve." "Enough." Benjamin's composure cracked completely. "I've listened to enough from you. You're a nobody who got involved in something that's none of your business. My father has dementia. He doesn't know what he wants. He doesn't recognize me. He needs professional care in a secure facility, not emotional attachment to strangers who can't possibly provide what he needs." "We're not strangers," Sophia said, her voice shaking with anger and tears. "We're his family. More family than you've been, apparently." Benjamin turned to look at Sophia, really look at her for the first time. Something in his expression shifted. Maybe seeing a teenage girl close to tears, maybe recognizing something of himself at that age, some memory of caring, before ambition and success had hardened him. "Young lady," Benjamin said, his voice less harsh now, almost gentle, "you don't understand the complexities of adult life. The impossible choices, you can't know." "I understand that he's scared," Sophia interrupted, tears now streaming down her face. "I understand that in 5 weeks we've seen him laugh and play cards and watch TV and enjoy simple things. We've seen him happy, and I understand that the second you walked in, he looked like someone was sentencing him to prison. That tells me everything I need to know." 2 paramedics arrived within minutes. They must have been waiting nearby. Benjamin prepared for resistance. They were professional, efficient, carrying a gurney-style wheelchair designed for transport. "Don't do this," Marcus said to Benjamin one last time. Please, give us a few days, let him adjust to the idea gradually. Let me help prepare him, don't traumatize him like this. My father needs to be back in professional care. This situation has gone on long enough. Benjamin's voice was firm, but Marcus could hear something underneath it now, not quite guilt, but close. A man trying very hard to convince himself he was doing the right thing. The paramedics began the transfer. Walter fought as much as his frail body allowed, crying, reaching desperately for Marcus and Sophia, making sounds that pierced Marcus to his core, the sounds of someone being taken from the only safety they'd known in God knows how long. I'm sorry, Marcus whispered, holding his hand until the last possible moment. I'm so sorry, Walter. I tried. I really tried. You'll be okay. You'll be okay. You'll be— Don't. He couldn't finish the lie. He wouldn't be okay. They both knew it. As they wheeled him toward the door, Walter's eyes locked on his. In them, Marcus saw betrayal, fear, and a kind of terrible resignation, as if he'd always known this was how it would end, as if kindness had always been temporary in his experience, something that could be snatched away without warning by those with more power. The door closed behind them. Through the window, Marcus watched as they loaded Walter into the Mercedes, his face visible through the tinted window, still looking back at the house, at the life he'd had for 5 brief weeks. Then the car pulled away, and he was gone. Marcus and Sophia stood in their suddenly empty living room, the silence crushing after 5 weeks of Walter's presence. The house felt hollow, dead. The photo album still sat on the coffee table where she and Walter had been looking at it. His teacup, the one he'd claimed as his own, sat in the dish rack. The throw blanket he'd wrapped himself in while watching TV was draped over the back of the couch. We just let them take him, Sophia said, her voice breaking. We just gave up. What else could we do, sweetheart? I don't know, something, anything. Tears streamed down Sophia's face, but we just let him go. Like he didn't matter, like these 5 weeks didn't matter. He matters. Marcus's own voice was rough with unshed tears. He matters more than you know. But sometimes mattering isn't enough. Sometimes power wins, and all we can do is survive and remember. They stood there in the emptiness, 2 people who tried to do the right thing and failed anyway. That night, neither of them could sleep. Marcus lay in his bed, the bed Walter had slept in, and stared at the ceiling. He kept thinking about Walter's face in that final moment, the way he'd looked at him, like he'd broken a promise he'd never actually made. Around 2 in the morning, his phone rang, unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. Mr. Jenkins, this is Nurse Sarah Martin, from Pinecrest Manor. The woman's voice was hushed, urgent. I'm calling about Walter Whitmore. I probably shouldn't be doing this. I could lose my job, but I feel like you need to know. Marcus sat up. What about him? Is he okay? No, he's not. Sarah's voice was pained. He's shut down completely. Won't eat, won't sleep, won't engage with anyone. Just sits in his wheelchair staring at the door crying. The doctor wants to put him on heavy sedatives to calm him down, but Sarah paused. Mr. Jenkins, I've been caring for Mr. Whitmore for 3 years. I've never seen him this distressed. It's like something in him broke. Marcus felt sick. Why are you telling me this? Because I've read the stories about how you cared for him. I've seen the photos, and I need you to understand something about Benjamin Whitmore and his father. Sarah's voice dropped even lower. He doesn't visit. Not for holidays, not for his birthday, not ever. In the 3 years I've worked here, he's come exactly 4 times, and I've been here almost every shift. The last visit was 8 months ago, and he stayed for maybe 10 minutes, just long enough to sign some paperwork. Marcus felt rage building in his chest. Then why did he come get him now? My guess, his company is going public next month. There's been all sorts of press coverage ramping up, investor meetings, media interviews, profiles being written. A missing father with dementia would be terrible optics. Questions about family values, character, leadership. Much better to retrieve him quietly, make sure everything looks proper before the big IPO. This is about his reputation, about money. With Benjamin Whitmore, everything is about the company, everything. Sarah sighed. Look, I shouldn't be calling you. This violates about 6 different policies, but Mr. Whitmore deserves better than this. Someone should know the truth about what's happening to him. What can I do? He has legal power of attorney. I have no rights here. I don't know.
But he's fading fast, Mr. Jenkins. Without you and your daughter, without feeling like anyone actually cares about him as a person, I don't think he has much fight left in him." Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "He's giving up, and it's the saddest thing I've ever seen." The call ended, leaving Marcus staring at his phone in the darkness. Everything Sarah had told him confirmed what he'd already suspected. Walter hadn't just been lost in that storm, he'd been abandoned long before, warehoused in an expensive facility where his son could write checks and maintain the illusion of dutiful care without ever actually being present. And now Walter was back in his gilded cage, slowly dying of a broken heart because he'd tasted freedom and connection and love, only to have it snatched away. Marcus got up, too restless to lie still. He went to the living room and sat on the couch where Walter had spent so many hours. He pulled out his laptop and started searching. Benjamin Whitmore, Whitmore Technologies, Pinecrest Manor, the IPO Sarah had mentioned. He found articles about Benjamin's success, the rags-to-riches story of a brilliant programmer who'd built a tech empire from scratch. One interview from 8 years ago caught his attention. Benjamin talking about his humble beginnings, his single father who'd worked 3 jobs to put him through college. "My father sacrificed everything for me," Benjamin had said in that interview. "He went without so I could have opportunities. Everything I've achieved, I owe to him." Beautiful words. But there was no recent mention of Walter, no photos of them together, no quotes about visiting him, no evidence that he existed in Benjamin's life beyond that one interview from years ago. It was as if once Walter had served his purpose in his son's success narrative, he'd ceased to exist. Marcus kept digging, driven by anger and a need to understand. He found the Pinecrest Manor website, glossy photos of luxury accommodations, gourmet meals, personalized care plans. The cost was astronomical, $17,000 per month. For that price Walter should have been treated like royalty. He found reviews from families. Most were positive, but a few buried complaints told a different story. Great if your family visits regularly, but if you don't have advocates checking in frequently, quality of care declines rapidly. Wonderful for residents whose families are actively involved, less attention paid to those whose families aren't around much. Then Marcus found something that made his blood run cold. A lawsuit from 3 years ago, filed by a former Pinecrest Manor employee named Thomas Rodriguez. The complaint alleged systematic neglect of patients whose families rarely visited, with staff prioritizing care for residents with engaged relatives who might notice and complain. The case had been settled out of court for an undisclosed sum with strict non-disclosure agreements, but the initial filing was public record, and Marcus read through it with mounting horror. According to Rodriguez's complaint, there was an informal but very real priority system at Pinecrest. Residents with family who visited weekly received excellent care. Residents with family who visited monthly received adequate care. Residents with family who rarely or never visited were fed and medicated, but often left alone for hours, excluded from activities, given minimal physical therapy or social interaction. Walter Whitmore was specifically named in the lawsuit as a resident who had been left in his room for extended periods, given minimal physical therapy despite doctor's orders, sometimes skipped for medication rounds, and excluded from group activities. The lawsuit detailed one incident where Walter had been found sitting in soiled clothing for hours because staff assumed his family doesn't care, so why should we? Rodriguez had been fired for speaking up. The lawsuit was filed, and Benjamin Whitmore's lawyers had settled it quickly and quietly, paying Rodriguez enough to ensure his silence and making the problem disappear with money and NDAs. Benjamin knew. He'd known for 3 years that his father was being neglected, and he'd done nothing except pay to make the lawsuit go away. Marcus felt something crystallize inside him, not just anger but a cold determination. This wasn't just about Walter anymore. This was about every elderly person warehoused and forgotten. This was about a system that let wealthy people pay for the appearance of care while their relatives suffered in loneliness. This was about how money could buy silence and how power could make vulnerable people invisible. Someone needed to speak up. Someone needed to fight, even if fighting meant risking everything. And if not Marcus, then who? By the time dawn broke, Marcus had made his decision. He opened a new document and began to write. Marcus didn't go to work the next day. He called in, and this time his supervisor's patience was exhausted. Jenkins, this is the 4th time in 5 weeks. If you're not here tomorrow, don't bother coming back at all. We'll find someone reliable. Marcus accepted the threat. Some things were more important than job security. He spent the morning writing, pouring everything into the document. He wrote about finding Walter in the storm, about the 5 weeks he'd lived with them, about watching him come alive again with simple attention and kindness. He wrote about Benjamin's cold indifference, about the lawsuit that proved he'd known for years his father was being neglected. But he also wrote about something larger, about how society warehouses its elderly, about how wealth can insulate people from the consequences of their cruelty, about the basic human need for connection that no amount of money can satisfy if no one actually shows up. When he was done, he had 6 pages. He titled it, "I Found a Billionaire's Missing Father. Here's Why He Didn't Want Him Back." Sophia came into the kitchen around 9, having skipped ballet. Her eyes were red from crying and she looked like she hadn't slept either. "Dad, what are you doing?" Marcus turned the laptop so Sophia could see. "I'm going to tell Walter's story. The real story. Everything that happened, everything I found out about Benjamin and Pinecrest, how Walter was neglected for years while his son built his empire and paid money to hide the evidence." Sophia read silently for several minutes. When she looked up, her expression was troubled and scared. "Dad, he threatened to destroy you. Won't this make him actually do it?" "Maybe, probably." Marcus took a deep breath. "But someone needs to speak up for Walter and all the people like him. We're the only ones who know what he went through, who saw how terrified he was to go back. If we stay silent, nothing changes. He gets away with it, and Walter becomes just another forgotten old man who died alone. What if he sues us? What if you lose your job? You might have already lost it. What if we lose everything? Then we'll deal with it." Marcus reached across and squeezed his daughter's hand. "But Sophia, I can't sleep at night knowing we just handed him over to someone who doesn't care about him. I know we didn't have a legal choice about giving him back, but that doesn't mean we can't fight back now. That doesn't mean we have to let him pretend everything's fine." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, weighing the risks. At 16 she was old enough to understand consequences, old enough to know that standing up to a billionaire could ruin them. Finally she nodded slowly. "Okay, let's do it. For Walter, but Dad, let me read through it first. Make sure we can back up everything you're saying. If we're going to do this, we need to be bulletproof." They spent the next 2 hours going through the document together, making sure every fact was accurate and documented. The lawsuit was public record. They printed copies. The media coverage of Walter's disappearance was documented. They compiled links. Sarah Martin's information about Benjamin's visiting patterns couldn't be verified directly, but they had the circumstantial evidence of his obvious unfamiliarity with his own father. Marcus made sure to note, "Nurse Sarah Martin from Pinecrest reached out to inform me of Walter's current condition and to provide context about his care. While I cannot verify all details independently, her account aligns with documentation from the Rodriguez lawsuit and Benjamin Whitmore's own behavior." Around noon, Marcus sent his piece to every news outlet in Houston, local papers, TV stations, online publications, then to national media, the major newspapers, cable news networks, investigative journalism sites. He posted it on social media, on blog sites, on Reddit, anywhere he could think of. He included photos of Walter with him and Sophia, images showing a man smiling, engaged, alive, contrasted with the story of his neglect. The headline wrote itself, stark and accusatory, "I found a billionaire's missing father. Here's why he didn't want him back." Then Marcus sat back and waited for the explosion he knew was coming. It didn't take long. Within 2 hours, his story had been picked up by a Houston Chronicle blogger. Within 4 hours, it was trending on Twitter. By evening, it had exploded across social media, and major news networks were requesting interviews. The response was immediate, visceral, and overwhelming. People were outraged, moved, demanding answers. The story touched a nerve that went beyond Walter's individual case. Almost everyone knew someone who'd been warehoused in a care facility, forgotten by busy families, left to fade away in front of television sets they couldn't hear. The comments poured in by the thousands. "This is my grandfather's story. He died alone while my father was too busy with work. How do you become a billionaire and forget the man who sacrificed everything for you? This is what late-stage capitalism looks like. The elderly become inconvenient, so they're hidden away. Marcus Jenkins is a hero. Benjamin Whitmore is everything wrong with wealth and privilege. By evening, Benjamin Whitmore's company released a statement. The allegations made by Mr. Jenkins are false and defamatory. Mr. Whitmore loves his father dearly and has ensured he receives the finest care available at one of Houston's most prestigious facilities. Mr. Whitmore's medical condition requires specialized attention in a secure environment that Mr. Jenkins, despite his good intentions, was not equipped to provide. The family is devastated by this exploitation of a private family matter for attention and financial gain. Our legal team is reviewing Mr. Jenkins' statements for possible defamation action. But the damage was done. The statement was immediately mocked and torn apart on social media. People pointed out that if Benjamin loved his father so much, why had he let private investigators bumble around for weeks while he was missing? Why had he settled a lawsuit about his neglect rather than fixing the problems? Why had it taken a warehouse worker to actually care for him? Reporters started digging. Within 24 hours, they'd found the Rodriguez lawsuit. They'd interviewed former Pinecrest employees who, emboldened by the public attention, started speaking despite their NDAs. One after another they confirmed Marcus's account. Walter had been neglected. Benjamin rarely if ever visited. The facility had a two-tier system that favored residents with engaged families. Stock prices for Whitmore Technologies began to drop. First 5%, then 10, then 15. The upcoming IPO was suddenly in jeopardy. Investors were nervous. No one wanted to invest billions in a company led by a man who abandoned his own father. Social media erupted. #Justice for Walter began trending nationally. People shared their own stories of elderly relatives forgotten in care facilities. Petitions circulated demanding better oversight of assisted living facilities, stricter accountability for families with power of attorney, criminal penalties for neglect. Benjamin Whitmore became the face of everything wrong with wealth and privilege, the man who had everything except basic human decency. And through it all, Marcus waited for retaliation. It came 48 hours after his piece went viral. A courier delivered a thick envelope to his door. Inside was a cease and desist letter from one of Houston's most prestigious law firms. The letter was 16 pages long, dense with legal language clearly designed to intimidate. It demanded Marcus immediately retract his statements and issue a public apology. It threatened legal action for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, tortious interference with family relationships, invasion of privacy, and possible criminal charges for custodial interference. The letter threatened not just Marcus but warned that his exploitation of Walter might constitute child endangerment for exposing his minor daughter to legal liability and emotional trauma.
Marcus read it, his hands shaking slightly. This was real. Benjamin Whitmore was coming after him with the full force of his wealth and an army of lawyers who could tie him up in litigation for years, bankrupt him with legal fees even if he never lost a case. That night, Marcus barely slept. He kept thinking about Sophia, about how his choice to speak up might destroy his daughter's future. What if he couldn't pay for her academy? What if the legal battle consumed everything they had? What if Sophia resented him for years for ruining their lives over an old man made known for 5 weeks? But then he thought about Walter's face, the joy when he'd watched TV with Sophia, the peace when he'd eaten breakfast with them, the trust in his eyes when Marcus had promised to keep him safe. And he thought about his face in that final moment, the betrayal and terror as he was taken away. He'd broken his promise to keep him safe. The least he could do was fight for him now. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Marcus answered the door to find a woman he didn't recognize. Early 30s, professional but not hostile, carrying a laptop bag and a recorder. "Mr. Jenkins, my name is Rachel Taylor. I'm an investigative journalist with the Washington Post. I've been following your story very closely and I'd like to help." Marcus studied her warily. After the cease and desist letter, he wasn't sure who to trust. "Help how?" "I've spent the last 3 days digging into Benjamin Whitmore, Pinecrest Manor, and this whole situation. I've found things, lots of things. Documentation, witness statements, patterns of behavior. but I need someone willing to go on record, to stand up to Whitmore's legal intimidation despite the threats. Someone who won't back down. She met his eyes. I think that person is you. May I come in? Marcus let her in, and for the next 4 hours Rachel laid out what she'd discovered. She had her laptop open, showing him documents and emails, explaining the web of connections she'd uncovered. Pinecrest Manor didn't just have a pattern of neglecting certain patients, they had an actual documented system. Internal emails obtained through a confidential source showed that management had created formal categories: priority care for residents with attentive families, standard care for everyone else. The difference in treatment was stark and intentional. Benjamin Whitmore had ignored multiple complaints about his father's care over the past 3 years. Nurses had reached out to him at least 6 times over email. Rachel had copies expressing concern about Walter's declining condition, his isolation, his depression. He'd responded exactly twice, once to authorize a medication adjustment, once to approve a slight increase in his monthly care plan fee. Then silence. Most damning, Walter had repeatedly asked staff to call his son to tell him he wanted to see him. These requests were documented in his care notes, sometimes multiple times per week. Rachel showed Marcus the records. Patient expressed desire to see family, became emotional. Asked staff to call his son. Staff attempted to explain son is busy. Patient became more agitated. Patient asking for son again. This is the 3rd time this week. We tried calling the contact number but it went to voicemail. No callback received. Patient very sad today. Keeps saying he wants to see his boy. We reminded him that his son visits when he can. He said I'm forgetting what he looks like. Heartbreaking. He knew what he wanted, Rachel said, her voice tight with emotion. Even with his dementia, even with his speech impairment, he knew he wanted his son. He asked for him over and over, and he was systematically ignored because no one wanted to bother the important billionaire with his father's neediness. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. Walter hadn't been confused about wanting his family. He'd been abandoned, and he'd known it, and that knowledge had been part of his suffering. Why are you doing this? Marcus asked. This is a lot of work, a lot of risk for one story. Rachel's expression softened, became vulnerable. My grandmother had dementia. She died in a facility very similar to Pinecrest 3 years ago. By the time we figured out how neglected she'd been, how lonely she was, it was too late. We trusted the facility, trusted that the expensive price tag meant quality care. But she spent her final months alone, confused, calling for family who didn't come often enough because we were all too busy with our important lives. Her voice cracked slightly. I couldn't help her, but maybe I can help Walter. Maybe I can make sure other families pay attention before it's too late. Marcus felt a connection with this woman who understood, who'd been touched by the same kind of loss and guilt. What do you need from me? Your cooperation. Your willingness to go on camera with me, to speak to my editor, to testify if it comes to that. I need you to not back down when Whitmore's lawyers turn up the pressure, and they will. They'll threaten everything. They'll make your life hell. Can you handle that? Marcus thought about his threatened job, about their precarious finances, about Sophia's future. Then he thought about Walter, wasting away in Pinecrest right now because no one with power cared enough to fight for him. Yes, he said. I can handle it. For Walter. And I'll need access to any documentation you have, photos, medical records, if Walter authorized them, anything that shows how he was during those 5 weeks with you. I have photos, lots of them. Sophia took them almost every day. Walter watching TV, looking at photo albums, laughing at something silly. We wanted to be able to show his family how he'd been doing. Rachel's smile was sad. That's perfect. And there's something else I need. I need to see Walter myself, to document his current condition. You don't have access to Pinecrest. Leave that to me. I have my ways. Rachel closed her laptop. Mr. Jenkins, this story is going to be big. Really big. It's not just about Walter and Benjamin anymore. It's about systemic issues in elder care, about wealth insulating people from accountability. Are you ready for that level of attention? I don't care about attention. I care about whether this helps Walter and people like him. It will. I promise you it will. Over the next week, Rachel worked her journalistic magic. She interviewed 6 former Pinecrest employees willing to break their NDAs now that the story was public. She obtained internal documents through confidential sources. She tracked down other families whose elderly relatives had been neglected at Pinecrest, people who'd been paid off and silenced, who now wanted to speak up. She interviewed Marcus and Sophia on camera, getting their full story. Sophia was articulate and moving, talking about how Walter had become like a grandfather to her, how he'd taught her that showing up for people mattered more than grand gestures. And somehow, Marcus never learned exactly how. Rachel got into Pinecrest Manor with a camera and saw Walter. When Rachel came to Marcus's house after that visit, her face was grim, shaken. "It's worse than I thought," she said without preamble. "Walter is in a private room, isolated from other residents, supposedly for his own protection, but really so his distress doesn't upset other families. He's on heavy sedatives. According to the nurse I spoke with, Walter is barely responsive now, he's not eating properly. He's lost at least 15 pounds in 2 weeks. The doctor's notes say he's failing to thrive, which is medical speak for giving up on life. They're killing him," Marcus said quietly. "Not intentionally, but effectively, yes, he's given up." Rachel pulled out her phone and showed Marcus a photo she'd managed to take. "This is Walter now." Marcus looked at the image and felt something break inside him. The man in the photo barely resembled the Walter who'd lived with them just 2 weeks ago. He looked smaller, more frail, his expression completely vacant. The spark that had been in his eyes, the engagement, the joy, the humanity, was gone. He looked like someone waiting to die. "Oh Walter," Marcus whispered. "There's more," Rachel said. "I got permission from the nurse to try something. I showed Walter a photo of you and Sophia." She played a video on her phone. In it Walter sat in his wheelchair, staring at nothing, motionless except for shallow breathing. Then someone, Rachel presumably, held up a phone showing the photo of Marcus and Sophia with Walter, all of them laughing at something, Walter in the middle looking genuinely happy. Walter's reaction was immediate and devastating. His head turned toward the image, like a plant toward sunlight. His expression transformed from vacant to anguished in an instant. He reached toward the phone with trembling hands, making sounds of distress, not words but clearly trying to communicate something desperate. Then he began to cry, deep wrenching sobs that shook his whole frail body, reaching for the photo like a drowning person reaching for a life preserver. The nurse's voice could be heard. "Okay, that's enough. We need to calm him down." The video ended. "He remembers," Rachel said quietly. "Despite the dementia, despite the medications, despite everything, he remembers you. He knows what he lost. He knows he's back in a place where no one really sees him as a person." Marcus couldn't watch anymore. He turned away, his own tears falling. In that video, he'd seen Walter's soul crying out, trapped in a place that was killing his spirit, even as it kept his body alive. "I'm going to publish this," Rachel said, "the full investigation. Every document, every interview, every piece of evidence, including that video. It's going to be devastating for Benjamin Whitmore. His company, his reputation, everything he's built. The IPO will probably be cancelled. He'll face investigations, possibly criminal charges. Are you prepared for the fallout?" "I don't care about the fallout," Marcus said, his voice hard. "I care about Walter. Can any of this actually help him? Maybe. Public pressure can be incredibly powerful. If enough people demand it, Adult Protective Services will have to do a real investigation. Benjamin might lose his power of attorney. Or at the very least the attention will force Pinecrest to dramatically improve his care, because they'll know the world is watching." "Then do it," Marcus said. "Tell the truth. All of it. Show the world what they did to him." 3 days later, Rachel's story broke in the Washington Post. It was comprehensive, devastating, meticulous in its documentation, impossible to dismiss or explain away. The headline was stark and damning. "The billion-dollar abandonment, how tech CEO Benjamin Whitmore warehoused his father while building an empire." The article was massive, over 4,000 words with extensive documentation. It included internal Pinecrest Manor emails, testimony from 6 former employees, care notes documenting Walter's repeated requests to see his son, the Rodriguez lawsuit details, photos contrasting Walter's condition with Marcus versus his current state, and the video of Walter's heartbreaking reaction to seeing Marcus and Sophia's photo. The response was nuclear. Whitmore Technologies stock plummeted 27% in the first day. The board called an emergency meeting. Investors threatened to pull out of the IPO entirely. Venture capital firms announced divestment. Protests formed outside Whitmore Technologies headquarters. Hundreds held signs, "Money can't buy decency, where's Walter?" Billionaire profits, father suffers. The Texas Attorney General announced a full investigation into Pinecrest Manor. Adult Protective Services opened an investigation into whether Benjamin Whitmore was fit to maintain power of attorney. Politicians jumped on the issue. State legislators announced plans for new elder care protection laws. And Benjamin Whitmore, for the first time in his carefully managed life, was facing consequences he couldn't buy his way out of. Marcus watched it all unfold with mixed feelings. He'd wanted justice for Walter, but the sheer magnitude of the response was overwhelming. That question was answered when his phone rang on a Saturday morning, 2 weeks after Rachel's story published. The caller ID showed an unknown number. "Mr. Jenkins." It was Patricia Hartwell, but her tone was completely different now, less imperious, more cautious, almost humble. "What do you want?" Marcus asked. "I'm calling to arrange a meeting. Mr. Whitmore would like to speak with you. In person. Just the two of you and your daughter, if she'd like to be present." Marcus almost laughed. "Is this the part where he makes more threats?" "No." Patricia's voice was quiet, almost sad. "This is the part where he acknowledges he was wrong, where he asks for your help, with his father." But before that meeting could happen, something had to break in Benjamin Whitmore, and it did. Though Marcus wouldn't learn about it until much later. The night after Rachel's article published, Benjamin Whitmore sat alone in his 12-bedroom house in River Oaks, watching his world collapse. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Board members, investors, his PR team, all demanding answers, demanding action, demanding he fix this catastrophe. He'd silenced it hours ago, but he could see the notifications piling up. Hundreds of them. His assistant had forwarded him a sampling of the social media response. The hatred was visceral, personal. People weren't just criticizing his business practices, they were calling him evil, a monster, the worst kind of human being. They were posting his home address, encouraging protests outside his gates. Someone had created a petition with over 1 million signatures calling for his arrest for elder abuse. But none of that was what broke him. What broke him was the video. He'd avoided watching it at first. His lawyers had advised him not to engage with Rachel Taylor's article at all, to let them handle it. But curiosity, or maybe something deeper, some need to understand, had finally driven him to click the link. And there was his father, sitting in that wheelchair, looking so small, so vacant. Benjamin barely recognized him. When had he gotten so frail? When had that spark in his eyes dimmed to nothing? Then the phone appeared in the video, showing the photo of his father with Marcus Jenkins and his daughter, all of them laughing. His father in the middle looking happy. Genuinely, radiantly happy in a way Benjamin couldn't remember seeing in years. And his father's reaction to that photo destroyed him. The way Walter had turned toward it, the desperate reaching, the anguished sounds, the tears. The raw, undeniable evidence that even through the dementia, even through the confusion, his father remembered what it felt like to be loved. Remembered what he'd lost, knew he was back in a place where he was invisible. Benjamin watched the video 17 times that night. Each viewing was more unbearable than the last. He thought about the interview he'd given 8 years ago, the one Marcus had found. "My father sacrificed everything for me," he'd said. Beautiful words that he'd meant at the time. But somewhere along the way, gratitude had become guilt, and guilt had become avoidance, and avoidance had become abandonment. He thought about his father working 3 jobs, about how tired he must have been. How he'd gone without sleep, without meals, without anything for himself, so that Benjamin could have opportunities. About how he'd shown up at every school event, every graduation, every milestone, exhausted but present. And what had Benjamin given him in return? A check. A facility. Absence. Around 3 in the morning, Benjamin found himself in his study, looking at old photos. His father holding him as a baby. His father at his college graduation, beaming with pride. His father at the launch party for Benjamin's first startup, looking overwhelmed by the fancy venue but so proud, so supportive. When had he stopped seeing his father as a person, and started seeing him as an obligation? When had visits become burdensome instead of precious?
When had he decided that his father's dementia meant he wouldn't notice the neglect, wouldn't feel the loneliness? The video proved he had noticed. He had felt it, and that knowledge was unbearable. Benjamin's phone buzzed with another notification. His board chair, demanding a call. The IPO was in jeopardy. Billions of dollars were on the line. His entire legacy was crumbling, and Benjamin realized with startling clarity that he didn't care. Let it burn. Let it all burn. What good was an empire built on the broken heart of the man who'd made it possible? He thought about Marcus Jenkins, this warehouse worker who'd stopped in the rain for a stranger, who'd sacrificed his financial stability to care for someone he didn't know, who'd fought, was still fighting, to protect Benjamin's father when Benjamin himself had abandoned him. Marcus Jenkins was a better son to Walter Whitmore than Benjamin had ever been. That thought sat in his chest like a stone, heavy and undeniable. As dawn broke over Houston, Benjamin Whitmore made a decision. He picked up his phone and called Patricia Hartwell. "I need you to arrange a meeting," he said, "with Marcus Jenkins and his daughter, somewhere neutral, somewhere public. I need to talk to them. Benjamin, I strongly advise against direct contact right now. Anything you say could be used. I don't care. I need to talk to them. Set it up. What do you plan to say?" Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, thinking about his father's face in that video, about years of absence that could never be reclaimed, about the man he'd become, and the man he should have been. The truth, he finally said. "I'm going to tell them the truth." Marcus stood in the park the next morning, Sophia beside him, watching Benjamin Whitmore approach. He was alone, completely alone. No Patricia, no bodyguards, no assistants or lawyers or any of the trappings of wealth and power. Just a man in jeans and a simple button-down shirt, looking smaller somehow than he had before. The expensive suit armor was gone. He looked older, tired, his shoulders slightly hunched as if carrying a heavy weight. He approached slowly, his hands visible and empty, his posture non-threatening. When he reached their bench, he stopped a respectful distance away. "Mr. Jenkins, Sophia, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I know I don't deserve your time or your attention, but I'm grateful you're here." Marcus didn't stand, didn't offer to shake hands. "You've got 15 minutes. Talk." Benjamin nodded, accepting the hostility as his due. He sat on the bench across from them, maintaining distance, not presuming any familiarity. For a long moment he didn't speak, just looked at his hands folded in his lap. Finally he said, "I've been thinking about something my father used to tell me when I was young. He'd say, 'Don't get so busy climbing you forget who gave you the ladder.' I never really understood what he meant, until now." He looked up, meeting Marcus's eyes directly. "You were right, about everything. I abandoned my father, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. I told myself I was providing for him, best care money could buy, but really I was just buying my way out of having to actually be present." "Is there a point to this?" Marcus asked, his voice hard. "The point is I've watched the video. The one where my father sees your photo." Benjamin's voice cracked. "I've watched it so many times I've lost count, and each time I see more clearly what I've done, what I've taken from him by my absence. So you've had an epiphany. Good for you. How does that help Walter?" "It doesn't, not yet, but I'm hoping. I'm asking," he took a shaky breath. "I'm asking you to teach me, to help me learn how to be his son again before it's too late." Marcus stared at him, genuinely surprised. "You want me to teach you how to care about your own father?" "Yes." Benjamin's admission was raw, painful, "because I don't know how anymore. I've spent so many years avoiding him, feeling guilty about him, resenting the obligation, and now he's dying because of my neglect, and I don't know how to reach him." "You can't undo it," Sophia said quietly. It was the first time she'd spoken. "You can't get back those years, you can't erase his loneliness or make up for all the times he asked for you and you didn't come." "I know." Benjamin looked at Sophia, and there was something like respect in his gaze. "You're absolutely right, but can I at least try to make his remaining time better? Can I learn how to show up for him the way you and your father did?" "Why should we help you?" Marcus asked. "You threatened us, called us nobodies, tried to intimidate us into silence. Why would we lift a finger to help you now?" "Because it's not about me." Benjamin's voice was steady now, certain, you said that yourself. It's about Walter. I've seen the video of his reaction to your photo. I've read the care notes about how he asked for me, and I didn't know. I told myself he was too far gone, that the dementia meant he didn't really know what he wanted, but that was a lie. I told myself to avoid guilt. He leaned forward, hands clasped. He knew what he wanted. He wanted his son, and I wasn't there, but I'm here now, and I'm begging you, not for my sake, but for his, help me reach him before he's gone. Marcus exchanged a glance with Sophia. His daughter's expression mirrored his own conflict. Anger at Benjamin warring with concern for Walter, desire for revenge balanced against hope that maybe, finally, Walter could have what he'd wanted all along. How do we know this isn't just about your image? Marcus asked. Another PR move to salvage your reputation and your company. You don't, you can't. Benjamin's honesty was almost shocking. But I can tell you this, my company's stock is in free fall. The IPO is cancelled, the board is talking about forcing me out, my reputation is destroyed, and honestly, I don't care anymore. Let it burn, let it all burn if that's what it takes. He met Marcus's eyes. The last 2 weeks have been hell, but not because of the stock price or the business losses. It's been hell because I finally watched that video of my father, really watched it, and I understood what I'd done. What a monster I've been. Strong word, Marcus said. Accurate word. A monster doesn't have to be actively cruel. A monster can simply be absent, can simply not show up when they're needed most. Benjamin's voice dropped. I had every resource, every advantage, every opportunity to care for him. And I chose not to. Not because I was busy, I made time for everything I cared about, but because caring for him was uncomfortable, inconvenient. He paused, collecting himself. Mr. Jenkins, you stopped your truck in a storm for a stranger. You sacrificed your financial security for someone you didn't know. You loved my father better in 5 weeks than I did in 3 years. That's not just admirable, that's convicting. It forces me to look at who I've become and hate what I see. Marcus sat back, studying Benjamin's face. The man looked genuinely destroyed, not by the loss of wealth or status, but by genuine remorse. But Marcus had learned to be cautious. Words are easy, what matters is action. If I help you, you have to understand something. This isn't a one-time thing. This is showing up even when it's hard, even when he doesn't recognize you. I understand, do you? Because here's what connecting with Walter actually means. Marcus leaned forward. It means sitting with him for hours, even when he can't respond. It means patience when he's confused or scared. It means showing up 3-4 times a week minimum. Not when your schedule permits, but making your schedule permit it. I can do that. It means accepting that he might never fully recognize you again. That you might never get the reconciliation moment you want. You might spend months showing up for someone who sees you as a stranger, and you have to do it anyway because it's not about what you get from him. It's about what he needs from you. I understand, and one more thing. Marcus's voice hardened. This isn't about your redemption. I don't care if caring for Walter makes you feel like a better person. The only thing I care about is whether Walter's last months are spent feeling loved instead of abandoned. If you can help with that, truly help, then maybe we can work together. But the second I think this is about you instead of him, I'm done. Benjamin nodded slowly. Those are fair terms, more than fair. I'll meet them. And you're going to pay Sophia's way through Ballet Academy. Full scholarship, whatever program she chooses. You're going to fund a scholarship program for kids from underserved communities, not 2 million, but 20 million minimum. And you're going to completely reform Pinecrest Manor. Done. All of it. Benjamin didn't hesitate. I'll have my lawyers draw up the agreements this week. Sophia's academy tuition will be established in an irrevocable trust. The scholarship program will be set up as an independent foundation with community oversight. And Pinecrest, I'm firing the entire management team and bringing in the best geriatric care experts to rebuild it from scratch. Marcus studied Benjamin, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. But all he saw was a man who'd been broken down, who'd had his worst self exposed to the world, and who was desperately trying to find a way to make even a small part of it right. Okay, Marcus said finally, I'll help you. But we do this my way. We start slow. You don't just show up at Pinecrest and expect him to welcome you. We rebuild his trust gradually. Anything, whatever you think is best. And one more thing, you need to know that even if you do everything right from here on out, Walter might not recover. He's given up. The damage from years of neglect, from the trauma of the past few weeks, it might be too much. Benjamin's face crumpled, grief finally showing through. Then I'll have killed him. Through indifference and absence. Maybe, Marcus said, not offering false comfort. Or maybe we can reach him. But you need to be prepared for the possibility that it is too late. That all you can do now is be present for his end. Make sure he doesn't die alone. I can live with that, Benjamin said quietly. If he dies knowing I'm there, knowing I finally showed up, that's more than I deserve. But it's what I owe him. They sat in silence for a moment, three people brought together by impossible circumstances. Finally, Sophia spoke up. If we're going to do this, we need to start now. Every day we wait is another day he's suffering. Benjamin looked at Sophia with something like wonder. You're 16. Yes, sir. When I was 16, I was focused entirely on myself, on getting into the right college, on building the right resume. I wouldn't have crossed the street to help a stranger, let alone fought for them the way you fought for my father. Benjamin's voice was thick with emotion. You're already more of a person than I ever learned to be. Sophia shifted uncomfortably. I just did what my parents taught me. Show up for people. That's what matters. That's everything. Benjamin agreed. And somehow I forgot it. Marcus stood up. Decision made. All right, here's how we start. Tomorrow morning we go to Pinecrest together. You, me, and Sophia. You don't go straight to Walter's room. First you meet with the staff, you apologize for your absence, and you make it crystal clear that from now on you're involved. Okay, then we spend time with Walter together. You watch how Sophia and I interact with him. You learn how to read his signals, how to understand what he needs. You don't push, you don't expect recognition. You just sit with him and learn to be present. I can do that.
And tomorrow night you come to our house for dinner. Not a restaurant, not some fancy place. Our house. You eat what we eat. You see how we live. Benjamin nodded. I'd be honored. As they walked toward their cars, Benjamin stopped and turned back. Mr. Jenkins, can I ask you something? What? Why are you doing this? After everything I did, the threats, the intimidation taking him away. Why help me now? Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about Claire, about the lessons she'd taught him. Because it's not about you, it's about Walter. He's wanted his son for 3 years. And maybe, just maybe, if you show up now, really show up, he can have what he wanted before he dies. He paused. And because I believe people can change. My wife taught me that. She believed everyone deserves a chance at redemption, even when they don't deserve forgiveness. You don't deserve forgiveness, Benjamin. But maybe you deserve a chance to be better. And definitely Walter deserves a chance to have his son back. Benjamin's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. You don't know what this means. Don't thank me yet. This is going to be hard. Harder than anything you've built or achieved. And you might fail. But Walter deserves the chance for you to try. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Redemption, Marcus was learning, was a marathon, not a sprint. The first visit to Pinecrest was awkward in ways none of them had fully anticipated. They arrived early, Marcus, Sophia, and Benjamin, who showed up in a modest sedan instead of his usual luxury car, nervous and tightly wound. Before we see Walter, we talk to the staff, Marcus reminded him. Inside, Sarah Martin greeted them with a mix of surprise and guarded hope. Benjamin asked to meet with senior staff immediately. In the conference room, he stood at the head of the table, voice unsteady. I've been an absent son, he said. Worse than absent, deliberately neglectful. I knew my father needed more, and I chose convenience instead. He acknowledged the two-tier care system and admitted his father had suffered because no one was watching. That ends today. I will be present, and this facility will treat every resident with dignity, whether their family shows up or not. When they finally approached Walter's room, Marcus went in alone. Walter didn't recognize him at first, then something sparked, and he broke down, reaching for Marcus with trembling hands. I'm here, Marcus whispered. I didn't forget you. Sophia entered next, and Walter wept openly, clinging to her. Only after he calmed, did Marcus gently mention Benjamin. Walter tensed, fear flashing across his face, but he didn't pull away. Benjamin entered slowly, devastated by the sight of his father's fragility. He kept his distance. "I know I failed you," he said quietly. "I don't expect forgiveness, I just want to be here now." Walter studied him, confused and wary, then looked to Marcus for reassurance. At Marcus's nod, Walter reached out and touched Benjamin's face. "Benja, Benja." Benjamin choked on his reply. "Yes, I'm your son." Walter shook his head. Grief etched deep into his expression. The meaning was unmistakable. "My Benjamin wouldn't have left me." Benjamin collapsed, sobbing, resting his head in Walter's lap. After a long moment, Walter's hand settled on Benjamin's head. Not forgiveness, not rejection, just presence. That became the pattern. Benjamin showed up 3 times a week, every week. The visits were hard. Walter tolerated him at first only because Marcus or Sophia were there. Benjamin brought photos, music, stories, never pushing, never demanding recognition. Slowly something shifted. One morning, Marcus found Benjamin reading poetry while Walter listened, head tilted toward him. When Benjamin finished, Walter patted his hand. "She touched me," Benjamin whispered afterward, amazed. The progress was incremental but undeniable. Walter smiled when Benjamin arrived, reached for his hand, asked where he was when he missed a visit. Over time, recognition came more often. Benjamin kept his other promises too. New management at Pinecrest, better staffing, real care. But the most profound change was in him. Marcus watched him learn patience, humility and presence. "Do you think he'll forgive me?" Benjamin asked one evening. "That's not the right question." Marcus said, "The work isn't about absolution, it's about showing up every day." Walter improved. He gained weight, re-engaged with life, and sometimes when Benjamin entered, his face lit up. "Ben, my son." The first time it happened clearly, Benjamin had to leave the room to cry. One afternoon, Marcus paused at the doorway. Benjamin sat beside Walter's wheelchair, both watching birds outside. They weren't speaking. Benjamin held his father's hand. Walter rested his head against Benjamin's shoulder. Peaceful, safe. Benjamin looked up and mouthed, "Thank you." Marcus nodded, his chest tight. This quiet, ordinary moment was what Walter had needed all along. Walter lived for 14 more months after Benjamin's transformation. 14 months of visits and laughter, and moments of clarity mixed with fog. 14 months of Benjamin learning what it meant to be a son, of Marcus watching redemption happen in real time. The end, when it came, was peaceful. Marcus got the call on a Tuesday morning. Sarah's voice was gentle. "He's declining quickly. Benjamin's already here. He asked if you could come." Marcus called Sophia at her academy, and she was on the next flight home. They arrived at Pinecrest to find Benjamin sitting beside his father's bed, holding his hand, looking exhausted but also somehow at peace. "He's been asking for you," Benjamin said. Walter lay in his bed, breathing shallow. His eyes were closed, but when Marcus took his other hand, they fluttered open. A faint smile touched his lips. "We're here, Walter," Marcus said softly. "All of us." When Sophia entered, Walter's smile widened. He tried to lift his hand, and Sophia took it gently. "Hey Walter, we're all here. You're not alone." Over the next 2 days, they kept vigil. Sometimes Walter seemed to know where he was. Other times he was somewhere else entirely. But even when confused, he responded to touch, to voices, to presence. On the 3rd night, at 2 in the morning, Walter woke fully alert. His eyes opened clear, truly clear. For the first time in weeks, he looked at the 3 people who'd become his family. "My boys," he said clearly, his voice stronger than it had been in months, "and my girl." Benjamin leaned in close, tears streaming. "We're here, Dad. We're all here." Walter looked at each of them, his eyes full of love and gratitude. To Benjamin, "Proud, so proud, who you became." To Sophia, "Sweet girl, keep dancing, beautiful." To Marcus, "Angel, you saved me." Saved him too. Then he took a deep breath and said, "Thank you for not leaving me alone." "I love you, Dad," Benjamin said, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry it took me so long, but I love you so much." "I know," Walter whispered. "I know now, that's enough." He closed his eyes then, a small smile on his face. 3 more breaths, each softer than the last, and then he was gone. The silence that followed was absolute. Benjamin broke first. Deep sobs of grief mixed with gratitude. Marcus and Sophia stood on either side of Benjamin, holding him as he grieved. "I didn't have enough time," Benjamin said through his tears. "You made the time you had count," Marcus said gently. "He knew you loved him." "Look at his face," Sophia said quietly. Walter's expression was peaceful, relaxed. The lines of pain and confusion were smoothed away. "He understood," Sophia said. "That's what you gave him." The funeral was small. Benjamin gave a eulogy that reduced most to tears, speaking honestly about his failures and the gift Marcus and Sophia had given him. "My father taught me many things when I was young," Benjamin said. "But it took strangers to teach me the most important lesson, that showing up matters. That time, with the people we love, is the only wealth that truly counts." After the service, they buried Walter beside his parents. Benjamin had purchased plots on either side, one for himself, one left open. "So he's never alone," he'd explained. 5 years after Walter's death, Marcus stood in the community center that bore his name, the Walter Whitmore Center for Dignity and Elder Care. The building was beautiful, designed for gathering and connection. It offered programs for elderly people, support groups for caregivers, educational programs, legal clinics, advocacy training. Today was the grand opening, with plans to open similar centers in 10 more cities. Benjamin stood at the podium, but this wasn't the Benjamin Whitmore who'd threatened Marcus years ago. This was a humbler, gentler version. "5 years ago, my father died," Benjamin began. "But in his death he gave birth to something important. This center exists because he taught us that every person matters." He talked about the center's programs, the 800 families they'd helped, the vision to expand. He talked about policy victories, new laws requiring better care. That night, standing before Walter's grave with Sophia and Benjamin, Marcus realized how one small choice on a rainy evening had changed countless lives. Walter was gone, but his legacy lived on, in the center, in the laws they'd changed, and in the people they'd become. Kindness, Marcus understood, never ends where it begins. It multiplies quietly, patiently, and sometimes it all starts with stopping at a bus stop in the rain.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.